Hi everyone, welcome to a co-production of WION and VOA. I'm Susan Tehrani, live from New York City, and we start off with a story from here in New York, the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly. The war in Ukraine is likely to be the big topic for a second year when leaders gather at the UN General Assembly next week, but many developing countries are hoping to shine a light on issues important to them, including development, inflation, as well as climate change. Voice of America UN correspondent Margaret Bashir has more.
This year's General Assembly is taking place after a marathon month of summits and meetings, and some high-profile leaders are skipping the annual gathering. But there will still be plenty to talk about.
We will be gathering at a time when humanity faces huge challenges, from the worsening climate emergency to escalating conflicts, the global cost of living crisis, soaring inequalities and dramatic technological disruptions. And people are looking to their leaders for a way out of this mess.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to attend in person for the first time since Russia invaded his country in February 2022. It is an opportunity for him to appeal for international support, but he must also walk a diplomatic fine line.
Zelensky does have to be conscious that there are a lot of leaders from developing countries who have problems of their own, such as debt and poor economic growth. And they want to talk about those topics and not just the war between Russia and Ukraine.
That includes sustainable development, which is off track for meeting 2030 targets to end hunger and extreme poverty. The UN says if present trends continue, a staggering 575 million people will remain trapped in extreme poverty by the end of this decade. A two-day summit that the UN hopes revitalizes the goals will begin the high-level week.
Progress has been set back significantly in recent years. This is in part due to the lingering drag of the COVID-19 pandemic, the highest level of armed conflict globally since 1945, and climate-related disasters, as well as inflation and the rising cost of living.
There will also be a climate action summit on Wednesday that requires ambitious commitments to cut greenhouse gas emissions and phase out fossil fuels for leaders to get a place at the podium. And the UN Security Council will also meet that day at the highest level to discuss the war in Ukraine. President Zelensky is expected to attend. The Secretary General says there is space to discuss both the war in Ukraine and other pressing issues during the week. He said rescuing the SDGs is urgent.
I believe that there is room for all issues to be seriously discussed, and I am not afraid that the different crises we are witnessing in different parts of the world, that they will take out of the agenda the importance of the SDGs.
President Joe Biden will address the General Assembly on Tuesday morning, laying out U.S. priorities.
He will address the General Assembly where he will reaffirm our country's leadership in countering threats to international peace and security, protecting human rights, and advancing global prosperity and development.
With much on the line, the world's citizens will be looking to leaders to take action to improve their daily lives and safeguard their future. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, the United Nations.
To speak further about this, we are now being joined by Voice of America correspondent from the White House, Chris Casquejo, in Washington, D.C. Chris, thanks for joining us. The U.S. announced a wave of new sanctions against companies and countries that do business with Russia. What can you tell us about this latest development?
Good morning from Washington, Susan. NATO member Turkey is one of the targets in this latest round of U.S. sanctions, specifically Turkish companies that are involved in ship repair and do business with companies that are tied to the Russian Ministry of Defense. Finnish and Russian companies that the U.S. says source computer chips and processors from the U.S. and Europe, and they say that these processors ended up in Russian weapons, are also among the targets. Now, in other news related to the war in Ukraine, Penny Pritzker, who was the former Commerce Secretary under President Barack Obama, the Biden administration has tabbed her to lead private sector reconstruction assistance to Ukraine. Susan?
Chris, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was hoping to meet with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi at the UN General Assembly, but it appears that's not going to happen. Why not?
Well, the State Department says that Secretary Blinken still expects to host Wang before the end of this year, but the Wall Street Journal reports that China is instead dispatching Vice President Han Zheng to attend the UN General Assembly next week. Now, earlier in the week when he was on his Vietnam visit, President Biden speculated that Chinese leader Xi Jinping skipped G20 in India because he was too busy dealing with China's domestic economic crisis. But Biden went on to add that he will get to see him, referring to Xi, but he didn't specify where or when. But many experts believe that they will meet in November at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, or APEC, in San Francisco.
All right, Chris, stay with us as we talk about a tech startup in the U.S. state of California, which is using artificial intelligence, or AI, to mask the accent of call center workers to reduce discrimination. But some say that by doing this, diversity is being erased. The Voice of America, Matt Dibble, has the story. Take a look.
In the global economy, a call to a customer service center will likely be answered by someone in a faraway part of the world.
Just bear with me for a moment.
Call center workers can train for months to effectively communicate with customers whose native language and culture differ from theirs.
Okay, try that. Photographer. Good.
Despite this training, accents often get in the way, says developer Sharath Narayana.
There are at least a few instances every single day of his life or her life that they go through some level of discrimination and sometimes straight up abuse.
Narayana is a co-founder of California-based Sanus AI, whose technology can adjust the way a speaker sounds, with the goal of making an accent more relatable. A call center worker from the Philippines demonstrated.
Hi, my name is Iggy. I'm from Parañaque. Hi, my name is Iggy. I'm from Parañaque.
The difference can be subtle, but Narayana says it is helping call center workers avoid abuse.
We are not trying to hide the fact that this person is from India or this person is from the Philippines, but this person would sound so clear, so confident, and so crisp that the other person would like to have a conversation.
Discrimination and abuse by callers are among the factors leading to high turnover among call center workers. Narayana himself once worked in such a center. And although he doesn't excuse the behavior of callers, he says he understands what's going on.
When they hear that accent, the first thing that I see is that lack of trust with this person. Hey, I've waited so long for my problem to solve. Now I'm connected to somebody that I can't relate to, or his voice that I cannot relate to. Can this person actually solve my problem?
Sociologist Anish says tools like Sanus can help reduce the burden on call center agents. Anish, however, worries that it also points to what he says are dehumanizing trends in technology, namely erasing diversity.
Most of our communication is mediated through some technology. But when technology starts changing your accent itself, that is transforming you into your own avatar. Now, the driving force is not developing an understanding between human beings, but the driving force is transactional, in the sense that things have to get functionally done.
Narayana says that of the workers with the optional Sanus system installed, 97% of them are choosing to use it every day.
Because I was able to listen to one of my calls using Sanus, and wow.
It looks like English is my first language, where in fact it's not.
If there is a technology solution to it, where I don't have to change the way I sound, but the other person can understand me very, very clearly, why isn't it a beautiful thing?
For now, the AI seems to be helping people connect. Matt Dibble, VOA News, Palo Alto, California.
Okay, we still have VOA correspondent Chris Casquejo in Washington with us. Chris, this is an unusual closed-door meeting which took place on Wednesday on Capitol Hill, where leaders of top tech companies called for lawmakers to regulate artificial intelligence. Who was in attendance, and what sort of measures do they want?
Well, this was definitely a who's who of top tech company leaders. Elon Musk, Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates. Now, Elon Musk's key takeaway was that there needs to be some sort of refereeing mechanism for AI, and he expects some sort of new regulatory agency to be created as a result of any new legislation. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is the one who put together this private meeting between lawmakers and the tech leaders, and he says that the lawmakers are seeking realistic direction from the tech leaders as they consider any legislation. Now, there is one proposal that's already on the table from Minnesota Senator Democrat Amy Klobuchar. Her proposal would require disclaimers for AI-generated election ads with deceptive imagery and sounds. Now, Schumer expects some legislation of some sort to be passed before next year's presidential election. Susan?
And Google is confronting a threat to its dominant search engine as U.S. federal regulators have launched an attempt to dismantle its internet empire in the biggest U.S. antitrust trial in a quarter of a century. What is the government saying that Google is doing wrong?
Well, federal regulators allege that Google's internet search dominance locks out competitors and smothers innovation. They began their case on Tuesday by arguing that the future of the internet is at stake, and they question whether Google will ever face any meaningful competition for its search engine. Now, they allege that Google spends billions of dollars to be the default search engine on iPhones and Android phones. Top tech execs from other companies are expected to testify in this case, and so is CEO Sundar Pichai, parent company Alphabet, Google's parent company. A ruling is expected early next year. Now, you mentioned a quarter century. Microsoft. People say that Microsoft's decline happened because the U.S. brought a similar antitrust case against it 25 years ago, and many experts believe that this case against Microsoft led to its decline and allowed companies like Google to begin their run of dominance. So it'll be interesting to watch what happens early next year. Susan?
Great. Chris Casquejo in Washington, D.C., thank you so much for joining us from the White House.